Good morning, everyone. I'm the Chief Executive of the Hyde Group. I also sit on the Dame Judith Hackett's Industry Safety Steering Group along with Nick Coombs. And actually, I'm super excited to be in this building this morning, the Institution of Civil Engineers, because this is where I first became a chartered engineer a long time ago. In the days where when I walked through the front door, the people on reception just automatically assumed I was either lost or had mistaken this for the RICS just down the way. But we are a 50,000 housing association. We also develop 1,500 new homes a year, but what I'm going to focus on today is our existing portfolio. We are on a journey to best practice and competency. We are learning day by day. We're learning from ourselves. We're learning from all the consultants and experts that we employ, but also that we are meeting, and we are also learning from other organisations. So we don't claim to be the best. We don't claim to know everything, but we want to get to a position where our residents, our occupants of our buildings are safe and where they feel safe as well. So as I say, it's a journey that we are on. So the first thing is about having good governance, and I think for us that was really the starting point for us, having some good governance around things. So when Grenfell first happened, we started to mobilise a team almost that day. It's about 12 at the moment because we are 2 years into a 3-year remediation programme, but at its height we probably had about 25 people in there. These were not just pulled from whoever happened to be available in Hyde on the day. These were people selected for their knowledge, for their experience, and actually pulled out of day jobs and dedicated to this. And then they were supplemented with people that we brought in on fixed-term contracts from outside. Within 3 weeks of this happening, we actually had a board meeting. I remember it on the 7th of July, and we were able to say, I'm the sponsor, so that's helpful, I think, my engineering background. I think it's also helpful being the chief exec as well, because it does give us a profile. We've got a fire safety board, which meets monthly and is looking at the work of the task force, and we've got this task force set up. So 3 weeks after Grenfell, we were able to go to the board and tell them precisely how many buildings we had over 6 stories, which ones of them had got cladding on them, which ones of them we'd already discovered had got ACM, and also buildings that didn't have ACM but had flammable cladding on that we were doing something about. And we were also able to give them our programme of work that we were going to undertake. And that programme of work has been and still is, a very comprehensive, very systematic, very methodical programme of inspection and remediation on a block-by-block basis. And the acid test for us each time has been, we started off with one which was just, would I be happy with my mum living in this block, specifically on the top floor? And then the second one is, you can't unsee what you've already seen. And that goes to this business of, in part of our inspections, taking panels off on our high-rise and gasping at the horrors that we see behind it. But once we've seen it, I can't just put the panel back and go, well, the panel's all right, so let's just forget the rest. So we have been doing an inspection of all our buildings over 6 stories high. We prioritised it, so we did over 10 and then the 6 to 10, prioritised it still further into those that were clad and those that were unclad. We are just now getting to the end of that, so I've got approximately just under 120 tall buildings. By the end of March, by the end of this financial year, we'll have done an FRA 4 of every single one of those. And as Tom knows, we are using registered assessors, and we are doing independent audits of those inspections as well on a random basis. And obviously then following up with all the remediation work that goes with it. part of the reason for taking 2 years to get all these FRAs done is, as you can imagine, each one creates a lot of remediation work, and what we didn't want was this bow wave building up of all these remediation tasks and then us not being able to get them all done in a timely fashion. Importantly for us as well, we carried out tenancy safety audits, because actually, do we really know who lives in our buildings? And actually, do we know how they are living in our buildings as well? And so that did throw up for us issues of, we found some subletting, we found some use of Airbnb, we found hoarders that we didn't know that we had, or people that we'd been monitoring and it had got worse since the last time we monitored, and people with mental health issues who were quite clearly struggling to live in their properties. Cladding checks, so as well as doing the intrusive FRA4s, we've been checking all the facades. It says cladding here, but we've been checking facades, so taking cladding off and seeing what's behind it. And just later on, I think I've just chosen 4 photographs, which I'm sure some of you have seen before, but they're my sort of particular favourites at the moment. And as it says here, a lot of trying to use as many people with accreditations to assure ourselves of the competency of the people that we're using to do things, because actually no point in doing 120 odd FRAs that Joe Bloggs Limited has done if actually they're not accredited to do it, because how is that helping me achieve my objective of people being safe and feeling safe? Now that we're coming to the end of our FRAs on the tall buildings, we've switched our attention now in the last few months to our complex buildings, and we are looking at our supported and sheltered buildings that we have, and also looking at what principles we want to apply when we are looking at those buildings that fall. They're less than 6 stories high, they're not the sheltered and supported. I can't just ignore those as well. And in fact, I've got 2 buildings at the moment. One's 5-storey, one's 3-storey. And they've both got waking watch in them at the moment because of the extent of issues that we found just in the communal areas, which is going to impede evacuation if they ever had to evacuate. So it feels a bit like doom and gloom here. It's not meant to be. So layers of protection, mentioned by Nick earlier on, and it's one of the things that we have picked up on, and we're using it to help us work through things in a very systematic way based on some sound principles. So Hyde recommends this system approach to layers of protection, and we're saying, okay, that system apply a building. Every single building we need to apply it to separately. You can't just take a blanket approach to this. And then what we've got to do is look at what all the layers of protection might be and how much they add to the mitigation of any risk. Interestingly, in the recommendations, it also says that one can consider the sufficiency from an economic perspective. So the cost of the measure plus its risk reduction versus the cost of doing nothing, which I think is giving me a thing that says, do you know what, you don't have to spend huge amounts of money on something that will only give you a small risk reduction, even if that thing is not perfect. And then the second one is, which I'm a bit nervous about, is compare and contrast alignment with industry practice. So if nobody does anything, we're all fine, we can all do nothing. Not going to work like that. So I think, again, for me, in some respects, yes, I want to see what the rest of my sector and the rest of industry is doing. But I think if they're just sitting on their hands, that's not what I'm prepared to do. So just going into a little more detail with these layers of protection, what we've come up with at Hyde is we've got 3 sort of families of layers of protection. The first one is reducing the risk of a fire occurring in the first place. The second one is reducing the risk of it spreading if it does occur. And then the third one is, if the stay put policy becomes unviable, then what we want is measures that will ensure people can exit the building safely and speedily. So just a few examples of each of those. So reducing the risk of fire occurring, the obvious one is the use of non-combustible materials, particularly cladding, wherever possible, in construction and refurbishment. Again, going back to the people who live in our buildings, proactive management of hoarders, substance misusers, health issues, anywhere where their lifestyle issues are likely to raise the risk of a fire happening in the first place. Enforcing a zero tolerance regime with a sterile environment and proactive housekeeping in communal areas. So we are absolutely vigilant about keeping our balconies, hallways and escape stairs free of combustible materials, the buggies, the bicycles, the motorised scooters, barbecues, all the sorts of things that residents in the past have been used to keeping in their hallway on the basis that they've not got enough room in their apartment. It's not popular. When we're constantly going around, I knocked on the door of a resident's flat a few weeks ago because they got 2 bikes parked outside. And I said, I'm sorry, would you move these indoors? Have you not been asked to move these indoors before? Yeah, well, I haven't got the space for them. It's causing a fire hazard. And well, we haven't had any fires yet. Yeah, well, you might have a fire. And if you do, you have a duty of care to everybody else in that block, and you are impeding their exit. So move them inside, please, which, of course, he duly did. And then I sent round a property manager the next day and for the next few days afterwards to reinforce the message. Reducing the risk of fire spreading, this is all cavity barriers intact, compartmentation intact, appropriately rated fire doors and door sets. Looking at things like, should we have fire suppression systems, gas supplies in buildings, smoke and fire alarms, access by fire engines to all sides of the base of the building. So we might have in the past had car parking around the base of the building, actually now moving it away. Have I got good water pressure as well for when the fire brigade do come along? And then measures to assist a safe and speedy evacuation. The obvious ones, evacuation plans well known to residents, personal evacuation plans for all our vulnerable residents, clear signage, multiple escape stairs, smoke vents, open balconies, firefighters' lifts, all those sorts of things. Easier to specify in our new buildings, but actually what can we do in our existing buildings? And so what we do is we literally, on a building-by-building basis, take a sort of a pro forma, and you can go through it and go, you know what, it's 5 stories, it's not clad, it's got 2 escape stairs, it's got external balconies, and actually the FRA 1 has addressed, as we know that there are no compartmentation issues or whatever. You can sort of start to give that one a clean bill of health. But as I say, I've got 2 buildings, a 3 and a 5 story one at the moment, which I'm actually going to go and look at tomorrow morning to see, what do we need to do in those specific buildings, but actually, now we're thinking about what are we going to do in these sort of 1 to 5 story buildings as a principle and approach to dealing with fire safety with them. A couple of things we've done to make life a bit easier for ourselves. I'm sorry, that doesn't really isn't really easy to read there, so I've got a copy of it. This is our landlord fire safety record. It is basically an MOT checklist, runs to this long. We've initially got it for all our over 10-storey buildings. We'll soon have it for our 6 to 10-storey buildings. This is for us, and this is our checklist. And it, you know, how many stories, who's in there in terms of their tenure, have we got lifts, have we got how many fire escapes, that sort of thing. But it also goes into the detail of what did the last fire risk assessment say, what were the actions that needed, who's responsible in Hyde for ensuring that those actions happen, and then when they get signed off. It then starts to go a bit further than that and start to look at the lifts, the electrics, the gas. When were they? Have they got in-date certifications. When are those certifications due to be done? So it's starting to morph towards building safety rather than just fire safety. And what we've also done is we've now got a very user-friendly version of that on our website. So this is just a screenshot of a part of it. So if you live at the moment in something that's over 10 stories, you can go online, and what it will tell you is, it tells you who your property manager is, customer services is, tells you what the evacuation policy is, and it refers to, there's a link to London Fire Brigade's stay put policy, but it also tells you what to do if there is a fire in your apartment or you start to get affected by a fire adjacent and smoke and whatever. And then it goes on to say, here's the means of escape, here's where the nearest fire station is. So in this case, it's 1.3 miles away. It tells them what the significant findings are from the fire risk assessment. And it does say, if you want to see the FRA 1 or 4, do, but here's what the findings were, here's what we have done, and here's what we are doing. And then it also tells them, you know, the gas is inspected annually, the lifts are done twice a year, you know, and it tells them all those sorts of things. Now, what we did was, in order to get to those positions, we actually involved our residents. So we have a system called the Oak, which is just an online way of being able to communicate with and interact with as many of our residents as possible. And we have that in addition to our more formal resident engagement structures. But we basically did a lot of this on, the system is called the Oak, so that we could get as wide a contribution as possible. So posting onto it, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, really interested to know what you think, are you finding this useful, what more would you like to see on it? And we've got really good feedback. People like what the information we've got, but actually, as an aside, what they like even more is being given that opportunity to comment and to be involved. We also have, where we're doing work, as you can see, we've got these QR codes. So again, it just takes them to our website and it says, this is exactly what's happening on your building. So this is the work that's being undertaken, this is who's doing it, this is how long it's going to take, and here are sort of some of the main activities. We also do an awful lot of communication with residents before we go in. So we send out letters, we have drop-in clinics, we have Q&A sessions, and we have these things, the QR blocks as well. But I would still say we've got a number of residents who are very happy with what we do, but we've also got residents who are not happy about it. So I've got some tall buildings down in Gosport all clad up at the moment, and we're taking off Stowe Render, which I'll show you in a moment. That's all coming off. We had loads of compartmentation. We are finding windows that are way too small for their openings, with huge amounts of nice blue foam around them, same with doors, that sort of thing. So we are picking up all that lot. We're not charging the residents and leaseholders a penny for it, but despite that, we've got people complaining, I don't like the sound of the flapping plastic, and I can't see the sunrise anymore, and it's such a beautiful sunrise. So I make fairly pithy comments about those things, which is why I'm not allowed to ever go and say any of those things. And that's what I've got a comms team for. Right, so what we found, this is my favourite bit now. So what have I found? Poor build quality. And I hate saying this because I'm an engineer, a civil and structural engineer. I've worked in construction for 17 years. I've done entirely residential of all sorts. So I feel ashamed to be saying these things. Poor build quality, poor refurbishment works, deviation from specifications and drawings, unacceptable product replacement, and poor installation. So, number one, if it wasn't bad enough and I've got ACM all over this building, that somebody decided that they would replace the Z metal cladding fixing system with untreated timber battens. There was actually cavity barriers in place here, but they've been completely nullified by these timber battens which are just nailed all over them. That's come off now, actually. Here's the compartmentation issue. So we found them in new buildings, refurbished buildings. We find them in service cupboards in the communal areas. We find them stuck behind the baths, and then we find them in kitchens where somebody's post-fixed a nice little Ventaxia or whatever through it, punched a few holes. And don't even start me on BT and Sky. This is it. So here's the Stowe render. Do you know what? I really wouldn't recommend putting polystyrene with a bit of render on 22-storey buildings right down on the seafront, because the seagulls love pecking away at it. But anyway, despite all that there, instead of fixing it with, a sort of a continuous sticking stuff, we did a bit of dot and dab, because it's so much quicker, isn't it? Just get a bit more done. And so we've now created a nice little chimney there for any flames fire. Ooh, wrong way. And then this happens to be my particular favourite. So this is a tall building in London. This was part of one of our FRA4s. It's high-pressure laminate. That of itself didn't worry me when you look at it at the front. But part of the FRA4 is taking off samples so that you can look behind and see what the compartmentation is like. That was rubbish in itself. But when somebody put those panels down on the ground, they said, "What does that mean?" Non-fire grade rated. That's in a building, design and build, funnily enough, in around 2008. And so, yes, we are taking legal action against the builders of some of these builders. And I am adamant that I will fight them to the bitter end on it. And I had lunch with the chief executive of a construction company the other day, and I was wittering on about this sort of thing because I get really riled about it. And he said, "Well, it did get sign-off." And I'm like, "OK, so that's fine. You can do crap workmanship, provided you don't get found out. Is that the name of the game?" So that didn't go down well. And and again, apologies, because I've just realised this is being filmed as well. I've got one of my guys sitting in the back there, and he's got his head in his hands at this point. So, I just deny I said it. So basically what has worked for us, and I just stress again, we're on a journey. We don't always get it right. We have to sort of change course from time to time, but that is fine because we're doing something. So we have got this dedicated fire safety team. This is their day job. They sit in a particular office and it's all branded up. Everybody knows that this is the fire safety team. They've got a fabulous board where they stick up all sorts of data, so anybody in the office can go and have a look and see what they're up to. This very methodical programme of audit and inspection, I think, is really important. As I said before, I think it helps that I'm a CEO and I'm an engineer. I've done lots of residential, and so I'm there and very, very visibly sponsoring this, both internally and externally. Absolutely full support of the board. It's been fantastic, that. And the money side of it as well. I said to the finance director in about September of 2017, I think I'm going to need about 50 million quid for this, mate. So find me the money, will you? And I'm not going to slow down on development. We're not going to stop doing some services. And we're not going to spend less on maintenance. So, few degrees of freedom gone there, but find me 50 million quid, which we did, and we did it actually quite simply. We had some big stock transfers going through at the time, just doing some transfers between one housing association and the other, and actually we put some more stock up for transfer, but we just sold it rather than swapping it, and that gave us £50 million. I thought I was asking for far more than I'd actually need. Typical engineer, it was just like 50 million, that sounds like a good enough number. As I say, we're 2 years into a 3-year programme. We'll definitely spend it all, and I'll probably need a bit more as well. A culture that encourages competence. People have talked about this before. Act now. Don't just sit around talking about it. Act now. Be decisive. Have a bit of courage. You've just got to go for it. Focus. Be very systematic. Prioritise things. But on the same, you can't just go down train tracks on this. You've got to be agile, flexible. You've got to be willing to adapt what you're going to do in the face of new information. So you can't just go, I'm going like this, and nobody's going to stop me with that. Few reflections just to finish. I hope I've stressed this all the way through. We don't have all the answers. I am very happy when I find other people, other organisations doing stuff that I think is really good for us to say, do you know what, that's brilliant, we'll do that as well. So quite happy to do that. It's not just the technical issue, it's not just a building issue, this is about people. Within a building, there is the fabric of the building, but there are the people living in that, and we cannot ignore the way in which people live and the way in which that therefore raises some of our risks. I think for us, Tom, thank you for mentioning briefly our fire safety frameworks that we're just getting close to the end of. So this is about ensuring the competencies of the organisations, of the products and of the individual people installing it for us, ensuring that competency. It is a framework that we've set up, been fully OJU'd, available to any housing association that would like to use it on a call-off basis. We're also starting up a fire door replacement programme in this next financial year. We have held off on fire door replacements simply because we didn't know which ones to use, and now we do know. We've got a good number of doors, the sets and the installers to go with it. Again, we'll do that as a programme. Lastly, for me, very swiftly, for me now it's about us morphing this from fire safety to building safety, so going beyond fire. Looking at Hackett's recommendations, just doing it over 10 stories, I think, as Nick suggested, not good enough for us. We need to look at what do we need to do for 6 to 10 and for anything, or 18 metres to 30, and then anything in below that. We need to, again, be very systematic and look at these duty holders, building safety managers. And that's it. But at the end of the day, the objective is people being safe in our buildings and feeling safe in our buildings. That's the end game for us. So we've come quite a way, but there's a long, long way to go. Okay, done. Thank you.